He thought it was a joke. A billionaire, untouchable, mocking the woman who loved him in silence. But when he saw the baby, the same dimples, the same eyes, his laughter died in his throat. Now he must face the one truth money can't bury. Welcome, beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The city moved for Adrian Vale. His empire of glass towers cut through the morning fog, a reflection of precision and power. His name opened doors, commanded fear, and shaped markets. Yet, in the stillness of his penthouse, there was no sound but the whisper of the sea below. Every morning was the same. The scent of imported coffee he never drank, the rustle of a tailored suit, the polished click of cufflinks against glass. Control, that was his religion. He believed that emotions were liabilities, that love was a transaction that always cost too much. Mr. Vale, the investor call is in 10 minutes. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. I'll be ready, Adrian replied, his tone even, practiced, not a word wasted. But when the call ended and the city's noise returned, he found himself staring at a photograph tucked inside his wallet. His mother, hair tied back, smile soft but tired. He hadn't looked at it in months, yet he couldn't throw it away. She'd once told him, "You don't have to be hard to be strong, Adrian." But she died poor, alone, and that, in his mind, had been the price of softness. So he built walls of marble and money. And behind them, he forgot how to feel. Across the mansion's lower floor, Clara Maid'S hummed softly as rain danced against the windows. She had been with the household for 3 years, invisible but dependable. She moved like sunlight through the shadows of luxury, folding, dusting, and bringing warmth to a place built on silence. The other staff liked her. "Clara, you always hum," one of the cooks teased. "What's the song about?" She smiled, shaking her head. "It's not about anything. It's just something my mother used to sing when she didn't want the sadness to win." The cook laughed. "Then keep singing, girl. This house needs it." And maybe it did, because Adrian's mansion wasn't cruel, just quiet, the kind of quiet that made clocks sound louder and hearts ache harder. That night, the power went out. The storm outside was merciless, wind clawing at the windows. The generator failed, and Clara found herself lighting candles in the hallways, her reflection flickering across the glass. She didn't expect to find Adrian standing by the window, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded. The stormlight painted him in shadows. "You should be asleep," he said quietly. She startled. "The power's out, sir. I was just—" He turned, the faintest curve of a smile tugging his lips, making sure everyone else was all right. Her heart caught. He knew. He'd noticed. And for a moment, the billionaire didn't look like a man made of marble. He looked human. Over the next few days, something shifted. Adrian began noticing small things. The way Clara pushed a strand of hair behind her ear when she was nervous. The way she left a cup of tea outside his office without ever waiting for thanks. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself she was just kind. But one night, when he found her reading by the kitchen window, the words slipped before he could stop them. "You like poetry?" She looked up, startled but smiling. "Yes. It feels safe, even when it hurts." "Safe?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Poems don't judge. They just listen." He wanted to ask what she meant. Instead, he said, "Most people would call that foolish." "Then I guess I am," she said softly, her smile not breaking. And for the first time in years, Adrian laughed, a small, disbelieving sound that felt almost foreign to his own throat. Clara watched him, realizing that behind the iron and ambition was a man who had simply forgotten what gentleness felt like. Days became weeks. Their exchanges grew longer, warmer. When Adrian returned late from meetings, she would be in the kitchen, finishing chores she didn't have to. He started timing his returns to those moments. He didn't touch her, not yet. But emotion has a way of filling silence until it's louder than words. One night, she found him staring at the rain again. "You don't sleep much, do you?" she asked. He glanced over. "Sleep is overrated. Or maybe you're just afraid of what you'll dream about." The room went still. She thought she'd gone too far. But instead of anger, he said quietly, "You're not wrong." Clara stepped closer, her voice low. "You don't have to fight everything alone." He met her gaze, intense, searching, and something unspoken passed between them. It happened on a night that smelled of rain again. The city was drowned in thunder. A lightning strike knocked out the mansion's power once more. She was lighting candles, just as before. "Mr. Vale," she called. He appeared from the hall, jacket soaked, eyes unreadable. Car broke down. Walked the rest of the way. "You're drenched," she said, stepping closer. He should have pulled back when her hands brushed his sleeve, when her warmth reached him. But years of loneliness and denial shattered in an instant. He caught her wrist gently. "Clara." Her breath caught. "This is wrong." "Then tell me to stop," he whispered. But she didn't. Their kiss was soft, hesitant, like both were afraid it might break them. It was the kind of moment that never should have happened, but would never be forgotten. Sunlight touched the room like a secret. Clara woke first, tangled in sheets she didn't belong in. Guilt, warmth, and confusion collided inside her. Adrian stirred, eyes heavy with thoughts he couldn't name. "Clara." She smiled faintly, trying to mask her fear. "You don't have to say anything." He reached for her hand, then stopped, the gesture half-formed, unfinished. "Breakfast will be ready soon," she whispered, slipping away before he could speak. He watched her leave, already knowing that something real had happened, something he couldn't afford to feel. But emotion is a debt that always demands payment. And in that quiet, guilt already began to grow roots. Outside, the storm had passed, but its scent lingered, sharp and electric. Inside, two hearts beat out of sync, one afraid of love, the other afraid of losing it. In the kitchen, Clara whispered to herself, "Nothing good lasts for people like me." And upstairs, Adrian stared at his reflection, asking silently, "What have I done?" The house, once silent, now held a secret that would change everything. Do you believe love can bloom between two souls separated by power, pride, and circumstance, or is it doomed before it begins? Share your thoughts below. The next few days unfolded in silence. Not awkward, just fragile, like glass balancing on air. Clara went about her duties as if nothing had happened. Adrian pretended not to watch her. But the air between them carried memory like perfume, faint, undeniable, and impossible to hide. He caught himself pausing by the kitchen door when she laughed with the cook, his chest tightening. She caught herself glancing toward the stairs whenever footsteps echoed above. One night, he walked into the garden to find her wiping dew from the bench beneath the oak tree. "You shouldn't be out this late," he said softly. "I could say the same to you," she answered, her tone light but guarded. The moonlight fell over her like silver. Adrian hesitated, every instinct screaming to stay away, and yet he sat beside her. "About that night," he began. She looked at him, waiting. He exhaled. "It wasn't supposed to happen." She nodded once, her voice barely audible. "I know." But her eyes, sad, steady, asked what her words wouldn't. "Did it mean nothing to you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he whispered, "You make me forget who I'm supposed to be." And she, trembling, whispered back, "Maybe that's the problem." The wind rustled the trees. The distance between them remained, emotional, heavy, but in their silence, a strange warmth flickered, both frightening and real. Over the following weeks, their encounters grew rarer but deeper. A passing glance across a hallway. A momentary brush of hands when she served coffee. Neither spoke of what happened, yet every glance carried the weight of unsaid emotion. Adrian began staying home more often, abandoning late-night meetings. He would work from his study and, without reason, step out just to watch her tend to the garden. He started noticing things that shouldn't have mattered. How she tucked her hair when she was thinking, how she whispered to herself when she folded sheets, how her laughter softened the edges of his house. And sometimes, when loneliness became unbearable, he'd walk past her room just to hear the faint hum of her singing. He didn't understand why it hurt and soothed him at once. The storm returned one night, heavier than before, roaring against the mansion's walls. Clara was in the library, closing windows, when Adrian appeared at the doorway. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his eyes darker than the sky behind him. "You're still awake," he said. "So are you," she replied. Lightning split the sky. The room trembled. Adrian stepped closer, the glow of the fireplace catching the edge of his face. "Clara, I don't know how to explain what's happening to me." She swallowed, her pulse quickening. "You don't have to, but I want to." His voice cracked slightly, rare, unguarded. "I've spent my life controlling everything, everyone. Yet you," he shook his head. "You undo me just by standing there." She took a step back, overwhelmed. "Don't say that. We both know what this is, a mistake you'll regret." "I already regret not saying this sooner," he said, closing the distance between them. She looked up at him, eyes bright, torn. "You'll hurt me," she whispered. "I already am," he said and kissed her. The kiss wasn't gentle this time. It was desperate, like two souls breaking open. When the storm subsided, they were still there, holding on to something fragile and fleeting, both knowing it couldn't last, but neither willing to let go. Clara woke early, the faint ache of memory heavy in her chest. Sunlight crept across the sheets, and for a moment, she allowed herself to smile. But the sound of Adrian's voice on the phone outside froze her. "Handle it. No press. No rumors," he was saying sharply. "The last thing I need is distraction." A pause. Then softer, colder. "I don't get involved with anyone. Especially not staff." Her stomach twisted. When he came back inside, she was already dressed. "I made coffee," she said, her tone even, fragile. He stopped, studying her face, the absence of warmth where it used to be. "Clara." She shook her head. "It's all right. You don't owe me anything." But in her eyes, he saw the hurt. And in that moment, for the first time, Adrian realized the cost of his own fear. 2 weeks passed. Adrian threw himself into work again, shutting down emotion as easily as turning off a switch. But every room felt emptier now. Every echo carried her name. Clara, meanwhile, fought nausea each morning. She ignored it at first, blaming exhaustion. But when her hands trembled as she polished silverware, she knew. In her small rented room at the back of the property, she sat staring at the pregnancy test in disbelief. 2 lines. Clear. Unforgiving. Tears fell before she even realized she was crying. "Oh God," she whispered. The next morning, she packed her courage and the truth into a small envelope, a letter, a test, and a trembling hope that maybe he would listen. When she entered Adrian's office, he was on a call. The city's skyline glowed behind him, all steel and distance. She waited until he hung up, her voice small but steady. "I need to tell you something." He gestured for her to speak. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words cracking midair. "It's yours." The world seemed to stop. Adrian's expression hardened. "That's impossible." "It's true," she said, eyes glistening. "I wouldn't lie to you." He stood, anger rising, not at her, but at the storm inside him. "Clara, do you have any idea what you're saying? Do you know what this would do to your reputation?" She interrupted, trembling. "To your empire?" He fell silent. Her voice broke. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't plan it. But I won't hide it." Adrian turned away, gripping the edge of his desk. "I can't be a father. Not now." Tears streaked her cheeks. "You already are." The silence stretched, cold and merciless. He finally spoke, each word heavy as stone. "I'll arrange support, money, whatever you need. But I can't." Her slap came before she could stop it. The sound echoed through the room. "I don't want your money," she said, shaking. "I wanted you to care." Her hands trembled as she reached into her pocket and placed the folded ultrasound photo on his desk. "That's your child. You can deny me, Adrian, but not him." Then she walked out. He didn't stop her. Couldn't. When the door closed, Adrian sank into his chair, the photo staring up at him, a blur of light and shadow that felt like judgment. He tried to convince himself it was for the best, that he was protecting her, the child, himself. But the lie felt heavier than truth ever could. Rain started again outside, faint at first, then relentless. And for the first time in years, Adrian Vale bowed his head and wept. Down the hill, Clara packed her few belongings. She didn't look back at the mansion. In her heart, she knew, if she stayed, she'd drown. As the bus pulled away, she pressed a hand to her stomach and whispered, "I'll keep you safe, no matter what." And somewhere miles above, in his glass tower, the man who denied her closed his eyes, haunted by the image of a woman's tears and a child he refused to claim. If you were Clara, carrying both heartbreak and hope, would you still believe in love after being denied? Share your thoughts below. Clara's breath fogged against the cold glass as the bus rattled away from the city skyline. The world outside was a blur of lights and rain, a landscape of endings. Her hands rested protectively over her abdomen. The motion was instinctive, unconscious, and fierce. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. Each passing streetlight felt like another heartbeat fading behind her. When the city finally disappeared behind rolling fog, she whispered to the child growing inside her, "We'll start over, little one. Just you and me." The bus hissed to a stop in a small coastal town several hours away. Salt air filled her lungs, the scent of waves grounding her as she stepped into an unfamiliar world. She found a modest room above a bakery that smelled of sugar and bread, warmth in place of luxury. It wasn't much, but it was hers. In the days following Clara's departure, Adrian Vale's world resumed its rhythm, but nothing sounded right. He walked through meetings, delivered speeches, signed contracts, all while feeling like a ghost inhabiting his own life. His assistant noticed the change. "You've been working too hard," she said carefully one morning. "You should take a break." He ignored her, eyes on the skyline. Work keeps things quiet. But work didn't keep his conscience quiet. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Clara's trembling hand placing the ultrasound photo on his desk. The sound of her voice, steady but breaking, echoed in the silence of his penthouse. When he tried to eat, the food turned to ash. When he tried to sleep, dreams came, of a child's cry he couldn't find. He poured whiskey, hoping to drown the noise. But guilt doesn't drown easily. It learns to swim. Clara found a job at the bakery downstairs, serving coffee in the mornings and wiping tables in the afternoons. The owner, Mrs. Rivera, a widow with a kind smile, quickly grew fond of her. "You work too hard," Mrs. Rivera would scold gently. "I like being busy," Clara would reply, though the dark circles under her eyes said otherwise. When her belly began to show, the townsfolk's whispers began, soft, curious, sometimes cruel. "She's not married. Do you think the father's coming back?" Clara learned to walk past them with her chin high. At night, she'd rest her hand over her stomach and whisper lullabies. When her son was born, she named him Leo, for courage. His eyes, when they opened, were deep gray, exactly like Adrian's. She cried the first time she saw them, not from sadness, but from the undeniable truth that love, even denied, had left its mark. 3 years passed. Adrian's empire expanded across continents, but his nights grew longer. He told himself he'd done the right thing, spared them from scandal, protected his company's future. But he knew the truth. He'd been a coward. One evening, after a charity gala filled with hollow laughter and empty champagne toasts, he found himself standing alone on the mansion's terrace. The city glowed beneath him, beautiful, lifeless. He took out his wallet, the photo of his mother still there. And tucked behind it, worn from handling, was the same ultrasound picture he'd once tried to throw away. He couldn't. "Would you have been proud of me, Mom?" he murmured. The wind carried no answer, only the faint ache of regret. Leo was everything Clara had hoped for: curious, bright, endlessly kind. He loved to chase seagulls and collect shells by the shore. Sometimes, when the tide was low, they'd sit together on the sand, and Clara would draw shapes for him. "Where's my daddy?" he asked one day, out of nowhere. The question hit her like a wave. She took a breath. "He lives far away." "Does he know me?" She swallowed. "He doesn't yet." Leo nodded, as if satisfied. "It's okay. You know me." Tears filled her eyes. She kissed his forehead. "Yes, my brave boy. I do." That night, she cried silently after putting him to bed. It wasn't the first time she'd broken down, but this one hurt differently, because Leo's innocence made her grief feel new again. Back in the city, Adrian's control began to slip. His temper flared in boardrooms. He dismissed partners, fired assistants. The gossip columns called him volatile, distant, a genius unraveling. His friend and CFO, Daniel, finally confronted him. "What's going on with you, Adrian? You're burning bridges faster than we can rebuild them." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Nothing's going on." "Bullshit." Adrian's eyes darkened. "Drop it, Daniel." But Daniel didn't. "It's been 3 years. Whatever ghost you're running from, maybe it's time you faced it." The silence stretched. Adrian finally said, "I made a mistake I can't fix." "Then maybe fixing it isn't the point," Daniel said quietly. "Maybe admitting it is." Adrian didn't reply. But that night, he poured his drink down the sink and stared at the storm clouds outside. Somewhere out there, a woman he'd broken and a child he'd denied were living their lives without him. And for the first time, he wished he were brave enough to find them. Clara sat by the window after Leo fell asleep, an old notebook open on her lap. The sound of the sea was gentle, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. She began to write. "Dear Adrian, I don't know why I'm writing this. You'll probably never read it. But there are nights when I still think of the man who couldn't love because he was too afraid to lose. Our son has your eyes. He laughs like you. That sharp, sudden sound that used to scare me, then makes me smile. He's everything you were afraid you'd ruin, and everything you could have redeemed. I don't hate you anymore. I pity you, because you'll never know how much light that little boy carries." She closed the notebook and wiped her tears. She would never send it. But somehow, writing it made her feel lighter. In the months that followed, both lives continued, parallel, distant, haunted by echoes of what could have been. Clara worked days and took evening classes in childcare education. She dreamed of opening a small school by the beach someday, a place where children like Leo could learn freely, joyfully. Adrian, meanwhile, kept receiving charity proposals from small coastal towns, projects he dismissed without looking. Until one night, his assistant handed him another folder. "Community Rebuild Initiative," she said. "Somewhere near Porto Azul." He froze. That name. He didn't know why it hit him like lightning, until he opened the file and saw a familiar bakery's photo in the background. And there, standing near the construction site in one image, was a woman with sunlit hair, holding a child. He dropped the file. For the first time in years, his heart raced not from anxiety, but from something terrifyingly alive. That night, as waves crashed miles away, two people, once bound by love, torn by pride, looked up at the same moon. Adrian whispered into the silence, "If I found you, would you even forgive me?" And on the other side of the sea, Clara whispered to Leo as he slept, "Maybe someday, he'll see the truth." Fate was beginning to stir again. The sea smelled the same as it had 3 years ago: salt, wind, and the faint sweetness of bread from the bakery near the pier. Adrian Vale stepped out of the black car and stared at the small coastal town that seemed impossibly quiet compared to the cities he ruled. He wasn't here for nostalgia. At least, that's what he told himself. The company's expansion plan had brought him there, where he intended to purchase land for a community complex. On paper, it was business. In truth, it was restlessness that had driven him here. The same pull that had kept him awake for countless nights, the whisper of unfinished things. As he walked toward the construction site, the sun caught on the ocean's surface, throwing light in his eyes. He lifted a hand to shade them and froze. Across the lot, near the temporary classroom built for local children, stood a woman handing out notebooks. Her hair was pinned up messily, strands catching in the breeze. She laughed when a little boy splashed mud on her shoes. Adrian's breath left him. It couldn't be. But even before she turned, he knew. Clara. And when she did turn, when those familiar brown eyes met him from across the distance, the world stopped moving. Leo tugged on his mother's hand. "Mama, who's that man?" Clara followed her son's pointing finger. Adrian stood at the edge of the lot, every inch the billionaire. Dark suit, composed posture, yet his face looked nothing like she remembered. There was weariness there, and something like disbelief. Her pulse thundered. She hadn't prepared for this, not for the sight of him here, not for the flood of memories clawing up her throat. "Just someone from the city," she said softly, her voice trembling despite herself. Leo grinned. "He looks lost." "Maybe he is," Clara murmured, and turned away, willing her hands not to shake. But Adrian had already started walking toward them. "Clara." Her name left his mouth like a prayer and an apology all at once. She faced him, every muscle tight, eyes cool. "Mr. Vale." He flinched at the distance in her tone. I didn't know you were here." "Life has a way of putting people where they're needed," she replied. "What brings you to Porto Azul?" "A new investment." He nodded slowly. "A community development project." "I didn't realize that I exist outside your mansion." The words slipped sharp as glass. Silence. Leo peeked out from behind Clara's leg, curiosity bright in his gray eyes. Eyes Adrian recognized instantly. The sight hit him like lightning. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Clara noticed the way his gaze lingered on Leo and stepped subtly in front of her son. "We should go." "Wait," Adrian said, voice breaking. "That boy, She cut him off. "Don't." But it was too late. In that single look, truth had already begun to burn through the years of denial. Later that afternoon, Clara sat in the small staff room of the learning center, heart pounding. Outside, construction workers hammered, children laughed, and life moved as if nothing monumental had happened. But inside, her world had tilted. He's here. Adrian Vale, the man who once shattered her, was here, walking through the same streets she'd used to heal. A knock sounded at the door. "Come in," she said. He entered, removing his sunglasses. The years had carved quiet lines around his mouth, but his presence still filled the room. "I didn't mean to intrude," he began. "I just wanted to talk." Clara crossed her arms. "We said everything that needed saying years ago." "I didn't," he replied softly. "I was a coward then. I won't pretend otherwise." Her composure cracked for a second, then steadied. "Cowardice doesn't disappear with confession, Adrian. Some wounds don't ask for apologies. They ask to be left alone." He hesitated. "Is he, Leo, happy?" Her jaw tightened. "He's mine. And he's safe. That's all you need to know." The finality in her tone should have ended the conversation, but Adrian didn't move. His eyes lingered on a crayon drawing pinned to the wall, a stick figure family, labeled in childish scrawl, "Mommy and me." His throat constricted. "I did that to him," he whispered. "To both of you." Clara turned away. "Don't you dare make this about guilt. You made your choice." "I know," he said, "and I've lived with it every day since." The sincerity in his voice disarmed her, but pride forced her to hold the line. "Please leave," she said quietly. Adrian nodded once. "If this project moves forward, I'll need local coordinators. I suppose we'll be seeing each other." Her heart lurched. "No, you'll deal with the committee, not me." But fate, relentless as the tide outside, had already decided otherwise. The following week, it was raining. The coastal wind howled, and half the construction site flooded overnight. The local committee rushed to organize temporary shelters for displaced families, and Clara's small learning center was chosen as a coordination hub. When she arrived that morning, soaked and carrying Leo on her hip, her stomach dropped. Standing by the entrance, sleeves rolled up and rain still dripping from his hair, was Adrian Vale. "Don't tell me," she muttered. "You're here to supervise the damage personally?" He gave a rueful smile. "Apparently, when I donate millions, they expect me to help carry boxes too." Despite herself, her lips twitched. "I'd pay to see that." "Careful," he said, stepping closer. "You might just get your wish." Before she could respond, Mrs. Rivera, the bakery owner and local volunteer head, called out, "Clara, we need more hands sorting food packages. Mr. Vale, could you help her?" Clara blinked. "No, But the older woman was already gone, leaving them no choice. They worked in silence for the first hour. The rhythm of rain on the roof filled the gaps words couldn't. Adrian lifted boxes effortlessly, while Clara labeled supplies, refusing to look at him too long. At one point, Leo toddled over, holding a soggy cookie. "Mister, you're tall," he declared. Adrian knelt down, smiling faintly. "You think so?" Leo nodded solemnly. "Like a tree. But trees don't wear suits." Clara froze, torn between amusement and panic. Adrian chuckled softly, a sound she hadn't heard in years. "You're right. I guess I'm an overdressed tree." Leo giggled, then leaned in conspiratorially. "My mommy says I talk too much." Adrian's expression softened. "She's probably right. I used to talk too much too." Their eyes met over Leo's head, a moment too intimate, too fragile. Clara looked away first, pretending to check the labels on a crate. By noon, the storm had worsened. The power flickered, and the air grew heavy with damp. Clara handed Adrian a towel without meeting his gaze. "Thanks," he murmured, "for letting me stay." "You weren't exactly invited," she said. He gave a faint smile. "Still, thank you." There was a pause, long, loaded. Finally, Clara sighed. "Why are you really here, Adrian? Don't say the project. You could have sent anyone." He looked at her, the weight of years in his eyes. "Because I couldn't stop wondering. About you. About him." Her heart stuttered. "You lost the right to wonder." "I know," he said quietly. But the wondering didn't care. Clara shook her head. "Don't do this. Don't come back into our lives just to leave again." He stepped closer. "What if I'm not leaving this time?" The storm outside rumbled, thunder answering the silence between them. That night, the power finally went out completely. Dozens of families slept inside the center, wrapped in blankets and candlelight. Clara sat near Leo, who was fast asleep, his head on her lap. Adrian was across the room, repairing a leaking window with duct tape. When he finished, he walked over and sat a careful distance away. "You've built a life here," he said softly. "I had to." He nodded. "I'm sorry I wasn't there." "You're sorry now?" 3 years too late. "I know." He hesitated. "But seeing him, Clara, he looked up at me like." She cut him off. Like he deserved a father who didn't deny him. Adrian flinched. The words hit harder because they were true. He said nothing for a while, only listened to the rhythm of rain. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "Does he know?" "No," she said, "and he doesn't need to. I've done everything I can to protect him from this." Adrian's gaze lingered on Leo's sleeping face. "He deserves the truth." "And what truth would that be, Adrian?" she asked, her voice trembling. "That his father chose pride over love? That he called his mother a liar?" Her tone broke on the last word, and for the first time in years, Adrian saw the full cost of his decision. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away, but she didn't hold back either. "I can't undo it," he said, voice rough. "But maybe I can try to be what he needs now." She looked at him for a long time, seeing not the billionaire, but the man behind the regret. "You can't just decide that overnight." "I'm not deciding," he whispered. "I'm realizing." The candlelight flickered between them, catching on the tears she didn't hide this time. Sunlight bled through the clouds, gold on wet sand. Families began to leave, laughter returning to the town. Clara stood outside, watching Leo chase puddles with other children. Adrian approached slowly, his voice low. "I'll stay until the project's done," he said. "You don't have to like it, but maybe we can start there." She met his gaze, wary but less guarded. "Start what?" "Making things right." Her lips parted, but no answer came. Leo's laughter carried across the wind, bright, innocent. He looked so much like Adrian in that moment that the denial, the anger, the walls, all felt suddenly small. Clara turned away, whispering to herself, "Don't let me believe too easily." Adrian heard it, and this time didn't promise anything he couldn't keep. He simply stood beside her, silent, letting the morning speak for them both. If someone who once broke you came back truly changed, would you give them a second chance, or protect the peace you built without them? Share your thoughts below. A week after the storm, the town glowed again with sunlight and new beginnings. The rebuilding project moved quickly, and Adrian kept his promise. He stayed. Every morning, he arrived early, rolled up his sleeves, and worked beside volunteers. He was quieter now, humbler, and people began to see not the billionaire but the man who listened. Clara tried to keep her distance, yet everywhere she turned, there he was, helping children plant trees, carrying supplies, or laughing with Mrs. Rivera over burnt coffee. One afternoon, Mrs. Rivera waved a flower-covered hand at Clara. "He's coming to dinner tonight. You should, too." I don't think that's a good idea," Clara stammered. "Then it's perfect," the old woman said with a wink. By evening, Clara found herself sitting across from Adrian at the small bakery table, the air thick with unsaid things. Leo dozed in the next room, exhausted from play. Adrian broke the silence first. "Mrs. Rivera tells me you've been saving to open a school." Clara nodded, eyes on her plate. "A dream, nothing more." "Dreams are plans waiting for courage," he said softly. "Maybe I can help." She looked up sharply. "Don't turn my life into another charity." He met her gaze evenly. "Then let it be a partnership." The word partnership made something ache inside her. Once, they had built more than plans together. They had built hopes. And he destroyed them. After dinner, Clara stepped outside for air. The sky was streaked with fading pink. The sea whispered below the cliffs. She didn't hear Adrian approach until he spoke. "I used to come here as a child," he said quietly. "My mother loved this coast." Clara turned. "I didn't know that." He smiled faintly. "Not many people do. My father was rarely home, so she'd bring me here." Said the sea kept her honest. His voice trembled. "When she died, I stopped coming. Thought it would hurt less if I forgot." She studied him, the edges of her anger softening. "You were just a boy." He nodded. "A boy who grew up believing vulnerability was weakness. My father made sure of it." Adrian's eyes found hers, haunted. "The day you told me you were pregnant, all I heard was risk. Risk of scandal, of weakness, of turning into him. I told myself I was protecting you by denying it, but I was only protecting the part of me that was still afraid." Clara's throat tightened. "And what about me, Adrian? What about the woman you left to face it alone?" His face broke with regret. "I see her every night when I close my eyes." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something worn, a folded page and a creased photograph. "I kept these," he said. She hesitated, then took them. It was the ultrasound photo she'd left on his desk. The edges were frayed, the ink fading. Beneath it, her own handwriting stared back, a copy of the letter she'd written years ago but never sent. She gasped. "How did you?" "I found it in your old room before I sold the mansion," he said. "You must have left it in a drawer." She looked away, ashamed. "I wrote it on a night when hate and love felt the same." He nodded slowly. "It saved me more times than I'll admit." Tears blurred her vision. For the first time, she saw him not as the man who abandoned her, but as the broken boy his father had raised, someone who'd never learned how to stay. From inside, Leo's small voice called, "Mama." Clara wiped her cheeks quickly. "I'm here, baby." Leo toddled out in pajamas, clutching his blanket. He blinked sleepily at Adrian. You're still here. Adrian smiled, kneeling. Couldn't sleep. Too much thunder in my head. Leo giggled. Mama says thunder means angels moving furniture. Then they're noisy tonight, Adrian said, and the boy laughed harder. Clara's heart twisted at the sight. Two worlds colliding, fragile and beautiful. Leo yawned. You can stay till morning if you want. Adrian looked at Clara, waiting. She hesitated, then nodded once. The couch is free. As Leo led him inside, Clara lingered on the porch, the sea breeze cool on her tear-streaked face. Maybe forgiveness wasn't a single moment. Maybe it was hundreds of small ones, quiet choices made between anger and grace. The house was quiet except for the steady rhythm of the waves outside. Adrian lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Sleep eluded him, memories didn't. He rose quietly, stepped out to the porch, and found Clara already there, wrapped in a blanket, watching the horizon. The moonlight caught her face, softening everything. The scars, the exhaustion, even the lingering hurt. I couldn't sleep, she said without turning. Me neither, he admitted. For a while, neither spoke. Only the sea did, whispering, forgiving, reminding. Finally, Adrian's voice broke the silence. You once asked me what kind of man denies his own blood. I think I finally understand. Clara looked at him, guarded but curious. My father, he continued, used to make me sit across from him during dinner, like a stranger. He'd correct the way I held a fork, the way I breathed, the way I existed. He'd say, you are a veil. You don't show need. When my mother died, he didn't cry. He sent her things to charity the next morning. That was his lesson. He exhaled shakily. When you told me about the baby, I heard his voice again, telling me to stay hard, to stay clean, to stay above it. And I obeyed him, even from his grave. Clara's eyes shimmered with something that wasn't quite pity, but deep understanding. You didn't just inherit his name, she said softly. You inherited his fear. He nodded. I thought love would make me weak, but living without it made me worse. Clara turned her gaze back to the ocean. While you were learning what you'd lost, I was learning how to survive. Adrian listened, every muscle tense. The first months were brutal, she continued. No job would take me once they knew I was pregnant. The whispers, the judgment, it felt like drowning in shame that wasn't even mine. Her voice trembled. I almost gave up, Adrian. But then he kicked. Just once. And I realized I wasn't broken. I was building something new. Tears slid down her cheeks. I worked every day until my body ached. I slept sitting up, saved coins for milk, and prayed Leo would never feel unloved. That's what strength looks like, Adrian. Not control, not money. Just getting up again. He closed his eyes, pain carving through him. You were stronger than I ever was. No, she said gently. Just forced to be. Her words hung in the air, tender and devastating. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn music box. I found this in my mother's old things, he said, setting it between them. She used to play it when I couldn't sleep. I brought it with me the night you left, but I never opened it. He turned the key, and a fragile melody began to play, soft, haunting, incomplete from years of silence. Clara listened, tears gathering again. It's beautiful. She believed that no matter how far we fall, Adrian whispered, music can bring us home. Clara looked at him, really looked. The coldness was gone from his face, replaced by raw humanity. Why tell me all this now? She asked. Because you deserve to know the truth before I ask for forgiveness, he said. I don't want it given out of pity. Her breath caught. Forgiveness isn't a gift, Adrian. It's a journey. Then let me walk it, he said simply. The music box wound down, and silence returned, except for Leo's faint snore from inside. Clara smiled faintly. He looks just like you when he sleeps. Adrian's voice broke. I saw it the moment I looked at him. His eyes, they're mine. Clara nodded slowly. They are. But everything good in him, his heart, his laughter, those are mine. He laughed softly, choked by tears. Then I'd say you won that trade. For the first time, she laughed too, quietly, but real. The sound loosened something inside both of them. They sat together until dawn painted the world gold. The light fell across their faces, erasing shadows that had lived there too long. Adrian turned to her. If I could go back. You can't, she said gently. But you can go forward. If you really mean to be part of his life, it won't be easy. I don't expect easy, he replied. I only want honest. Clara studied him, searching for the man she'd once loved. And in the quiet courage of his gaze, she found traces of him. She exhaled. Then we'll see. A fragile peace settled between them. Not a perfect ending, but a fragile beginning. When someone who once failed you begins to change, is forgiveness the key to your peace, or the door back to pain? Tell me your thoughts below. Sunlight poured through the bakery windows, spilling warmth across the tables. The storm had passed days ago, yet something gentler lingered in the air, like the world itself was exhaling. Clara moved behind the counter, hair tucked up, apron dusted with flour. She pretended not to notice Adrian sitting by the window, a coffee cooling in front of him as he watched Leo outside drawing shapes in the sand. Still here, she teased, glancing over her shoulder. He smiled faintly. You make the only coffee in town that doesn't taste like regret. She rolled her eyes. Flattery doesn't erase history. Maybe not, he said, but it buys a second cup. For the first time in years, her laughter came easily, unforced, light. It surprised them both. Over the following days, Adrian helped repair the playground behind the learning center. He wasn't graceful with tools, splinters and minor cuts proved it, but he kept showing up. Clara noticed the difference. Once, he'd measured value in deals and outcomes. Now, he measured it in effort and sweat. She brought lemonade one afternoon. You're terrible at hammering, she said. He grinned, wiping his brow. That's rich coming from the woman who nearly stapled her sleeve to a bulletin board. Their laughter echoed through the yard, mingling with children's shouts. Later, when the workers left, they stood together watching the sunset bleed across the ocean. Silence settled comfortably between them. No tension, no bitterness, just peace. Clara whispered, almost to herself, I forgot how it feels to be still. He turned to her, voice low. Then maybe we should both remember. Evenings became softer. Adrian started visiting the bakery after hours, helping Mrs. Rivera knead dough while Clara cleaned tables. Leo would sit on the counter, covered in flour, proudly supervising. One night, Leo clapped his hands. Mama, he made the bread wrong. Adrian looked at the lumpy dough in his hands and laughed. He's right. It's a disaster. See, Leo said, triumphant. I told you, Mr. Treeman. Mr. Treeman? Adrian repeated, amused. You're tall, Leo explained seriously. And Mama says you're trying to grow. Clara nearly dropped a tray. Leo, but Adrian just smiled, because out of the mouth of a child had come the most honest truth. One evening, they walked along the beach while Leo chased seagulls ahead of them. The tide was low, the air cool, and the horizon glowed lavender. Clara folded her arms. He likes you. Adrian glanced at the boy. He shouldn't. Not after. Don't. She interrupted gently. He doesn't know that man. He only knows the one who fixes swings and burns bread. He looked at her. And you? Which one do you know? She hesitated. Ask me when I'm sure. A gull cried overhead, and Leo's laughter filled the pause. Adrian smiled. Fair enough. The annual festival arrived, a burst of color and music after weeks of hard work. Clara hadn't planned to go, but Leo begged. When they arrived, Adrian was already there, helping run the charity stall. Of course, she muttered. He's everywhere. When Leo spotted him, he cheered. Mr. Treeman, come ride the Ferris wheel. Clara shook her head. Leo, no. But Adrian extended his hand with a crooked grin. For the record, I'm terrified of heights. You'll have to keep me brave. Leo took it eagerly. And somehow, Clara found herself stepping into the Ferris wheel car with them. As the wheel lifted, The ocean spread out beneath them, glittering with lights. Clara's breath caught at the beauty and the closeness. Adrian leaned slightly closer. You ever think the world looks softer from up here? She nodded, like it forgives us for a while. They shared a quiet look, the kind that spoke more than any apology could. Later that night, after Leo fell asleep on a bench clutching a balloon, they walked through the fairgrounds lit by paper lanterns. Music drifted faintly, laughter fading behind them. Adrian said quietly, "He's happy." Clara smiled. "He's always been my reason." "I'd like to be part of that reason," Adrian said. "Not to take your place, just to stand beside you." She stopped walking. "You think you can just step back into our story?" He shook his head. "No, I want to start a new one." For a moment, she couldn't speak. The night air carried the scent of sugar and salt, the sea murmuring beyond. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so much it scared her. "Don't make promises you can't keep, Adrian," she whispered. "I won't," he said. "I'll make choices I can live up to." And the way he said it, steady, humble, without demand, made her heart tremble. The next morning, the bakery smelled of cinnamon and sea air. Clara hummed softly as she worked, unaware that Adrian stood by the doorway watching her. He had woken early to help with deliveries, but seeing her like this, peaceful, radiant, made him pause. There was something sacred in the way she moved now, grounded yet free. "Are you going to stand there or actually be useful?" she said, not looking up. He grinned. "I was admiring the architecture. Of the building or of my patience?" "Both," he said, stepping closer. "And I must say, both are beautiful." She shot him a mock glare, but the corner of her mouth betrayed her. "You're getting better at this whole human thing." He leaned in slightly. "Good teacher." The air between them thickened, and for a second, it felt like the years hadn't happened. The laughter, the longing, the quiet gravity pulling them together again. That afternoon, Clara closed the bakery early and took Leo to the beach. Adrian tagged along. Carrying a kite, Leo insisted on flying higher than the clouds. "Higher than your fear of heights," Clara teased. Adrian chuckled. "You're enjoying that far too much." They ran along the sand, laughter mingling with the wind. The kite soared, a streak of red against the blue sky, and for once, everything felt right. Leo's laughter carried over the waves. "Mama, he's good at it." Clara shaded her eyes, smiling. "Of course he is." Adrian looked at them both, his chest tightening. "This is what I lost," he thought. "This is what I'm fighting for." As the sun dipped lower, Clara and Adrian sat side by side, watching Leo build a crooked sandcastle. "He's happy here," Adrian murmured. "So am I," she said quietly. He looked at her, the sunlight gilding her hair, and knew this was the moment he'd waited for. Not grand gestures, just belonging. When they returned to the bakery that evening, the radio played an old tune, a love song that had once been theirs. Clara froze. The melody carried her back to the night he'd first confessed he loved her in the empty ballroom of his mansion, just before everything fell apart. Adrian heard it too. He smiled softly. "Remember this?" "I try not to," she said, but her voice trembled. He reached for her hand, stopping just short. "Dance with me." She blinked. Here," he said, his tone gentle but sure. After a long pause, she nodded. He pulled her close, careful, respectful. The rhythm was slow, and her head found his shoulder as if it had been waiting. For a few stolen minutes, the years dissolved. There was no betrayal, no distance, just two souls circling the memory of love reborn. When the song ended, she stepped back, flustered. "This doesn't mean—" "I know," he said softly. "It just means we remembered." Later that night, Clara tucked Leo into bed and returned to the counter to clean. She found Adrian there, staring at a photograph she didn't know existed. It was of her, pregnant, exhausted, standing outside the small cottage she'd rented years ago. Someone from town must have taken it. He traced the image with his thumb. "You carried all that alone." I had to, she whispered. He turned to her. Never again. Her eyes met his, full of equal fear and hope. Don't promise things you can't keep, Adrian. I'm not promising, he said. I'm choosing. Every day, if you'll let me. Something inside her cracked open, a space she hadn't realized she'd kept locked. She didn't answer with words. She simply nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Hours later, the bakery lights dimmed. Clara lay awake, listening to the hum of the sea. She could hear Adrian moving quietly in the next room, pacing, perhaps afraid of what came next. For the first time, she didn't resent his fear. She understood it, because her own heart was trembling, too, caught between safety and surrender. She whispered into the dark, maybe people don't change overnight. Maybe they just start trying. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a tomorrow where forgiveness didn't hurt. Can love truly begin again after it's been broken once? Or does every new chapter carry the ghost of the old one? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. The next week unfurled in quiet grace. Adrian and Clara had settled into an unspoken rhythm. Mornings at the bakery, afternoons at the community site, evenings with Leo on the beach. It wasn't love reborn, not yet, but it was peace. One morning, Clara found a small note taped to the bakery door. It was Adrian's handwriting. Meet me at the pier tonight. There's something I need to tell you. Her pulse fluttered. She told herself it was curiosity, not hope. But she couldn't shake the sense that something was shifting again, something deep and fragile. That afternoon, a sleek black car rolled into the square, too polished for Porto Azul's dusty roads. Clara watched from behind the counter as a tall woman stepped out, sunglasses hiding her eyes, a diamond ring flashing in the sun. Can I help you? Clara asked carefully when the woman entered. The stranger smiled thinly. You must be Clara. I'm Vanessa Quinn, Adrian's business partner. Her tone dripped with sophistication and quiet venom. Business partner? Clara echoed. Yes, Vanessa said smoothly. And more recently, fiancé. The words hit like ice water. Clara blinked. That's not possible. Vanessa tilted her head. Oh, it's very possible. We're announcing it in London next month. I assumed you already knew, given how close you've become. She set a sleek envelope on the counter. He's been transferring funds to this address, for you and the boy. You should know it was his idea of charity, not fatherhood. Clara stared at the envelope like it was poison. Vanessa leaned closer. Take the money, darling. It's all you'll ever get from him. Then she left, heels clicking sharply against the cobblestone. Clara stood frozen long after the car disappeared. Her mind replayed every look, every word, every promise. A fiancé? Charity? She tore open the envelope. Inside was a check, and signed but unmistakably real. Her stomach churned. By the time Adrian arrived at the pier that evening, she was already there, wind whipping her hair, fury and heartbreak colliding in her eyes. Adrian spotted her and smiled, relief flickering through him. You came. She held up the envelope. What is this? He frowned. Where did you? From your fiancé, she spat. Vanessa Quinn. She was very kind to explain your generosity. Adrian's expression collapsed. Clara, it's not what you think. Oh, isn't it? Her voice cracked. Because what I think is that you've been playing both sides, mending fences with me while planning your perfect society wedding. He stepped forward. That engagement was arranged months ago. It meant nothing. I ended it weeks ago. Then why didn't you tell me? She demanded. Why did you let me believe? Because I wanted to prove I wasn't that man anymore, he said desperately. Not through words, through action. She laughed bitterly. Then maybe you should have started by not lying again. He reached for her, but she stepped back. Don't. Clara, please. No, she shouted. I believed you, Adrian. For the first time in years, I let my guard down. I let Leo near you. And now, her voice broke. You made me a fool again. The wind howled around them, the sea crashing below the pier. Adrian's face twisted in pain. You're not a fool. You're everything I ever wanted. Stop, she cried. You don't get to say that. Not when another woman wears your ring. For a moment, neither spoke. The storm rolled in fast, thunder growling, sky bruising with rain. Adrian's jaw clenched. She came here to destroy what I've rebuilt. She's bitter because I left the company. You have to believe me. I can't, Clara whispered. I can't keep believing men who only remember love when it's convenient. Rain began to fall, cold and sharp. Adrian looked at her through it, eyes filled with desperation. You're the only truth I have left. Then maybe you should have protected it better, she said softly, tears mixing with the rain. She turned and walked away, her figure fading into the storm. Adrian stood there, drenched and shaking, the envelope crumpled in his fist, the sound of the sea drowning the word he didn't get to say. Wait, have you ever trusted someone who broke you twice and wondered if you were to blame for believing again? Share your thoughts below. The rain didn't stop for hours. By the time Adrian reached the bakery, the windows were dark and locked from inside. He knocked, called her name, no answer. He waited on the porch, soaked to the bone, until Mrs. Rivera came down with an umbrella. She doesn't want to see you, the old woman said softly. I have to explain, he pleaded. Mrs. Rivera sighed. Some wounds don't need explanations, Adrian. They need space. She handed him a towel. Go home. Let her breathe. But home no longer meant anything. Every part of Adrian's world, his mansion, his company, his wealth, felt hollow without her laughter, without Leo's small voice calling him Mr. Tree Man. So he didn't go home. He sat outside the bakery until dawn, clutching the rain-warped envelope like it held the last of his hope. The next morning, headlines splashed across business networks. Vail Industries CEO steps down amid engagement scandal. Photos of Adrian and Vanessa filled the screens, their old corporate partnership twisted into gossip fodder. Clara saw it on the cafe television while serving customers. She froze, a coffee cup trembling in her hand. The caption read, Adrian Vail to return to London for crisis negotiations. Mrs. Rivera turned down the volume. You should talk to him before he leaves. Clara shook her head. He made his choice. But her voice faltered. Beneath her anger still pulsed something fragile, disbelief, or maybe the stubborn remnants of love refusing to die. That night, Clara found a letter slipped under her door. Adrian's handwriting again, uneven and wet from rain. Clara, you once said forgiveness is a journey. I wanted to walk it beside you, but maybe I'm still learning how to crawl. Vanessa showed up uninvited. The engagement was dissolved before I came to Porto Azul. I just hadn't told the press yet. That was my mistake. I thought I could keep my past separate from what I was building here. I was wrong. If this is goodbye, then let it be the honest kind. Tell Leo that the man he called Mr. Tree Man loves him more than anything. Tell him the kite still flies higher than fear. Yours, always trying. Adrian. Clara pressed the paper to her chest, tears falling silently. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to forget. But the words still flies higher than fear hit something deep inside. The memory of his trembling smile, his hands helping Leo tie the kite string, his promise to be better. And for the first time, her anger cracked under the weight of what she still felt. Days passed. The bakery felt different, quieter, colder. Customers noticed Clara's silence, but didn't ask. Leo did. Mama, where's Mr. Tree Man? Clara forced a smile. He had to go away for work. Leo frowned. But he said he'd teach me to fly the big kite again. Her throat closed. Maybe one day. That night, when Leo slept, she took out Adrian's letter again. Each word cut and comforted in equal measure. She whispered to the empty room. Why did you have to be real this time? Adrian boarded a flight to London the next morning. The sky outside the plane window was gray, heavy, a mirror of his heart. His assistant tried to hand him documents. He waved them away. Not now. All he could see was Clara's face when she said, You made me a fool again. He'd spent his life mastering everything except honesty with his own heart. And now, when he'd finally learned it, it was too late. He opened his phone one last time, scrolling to a photo of Leo laughing on the beach. "Don't make the same mistake I did," he whispered to the image. "When you love someone, tell them before the storm comes." That night, thunder rolled again across Porto Azul. Clara stood at the pier, the same one where everything fell apart. The ocean was calm now, reflecting the moon like a secret it couldn't keep. Mrs. Rivera's voice echoed in her mind. "Some wounds need space." Maybe space wasn't the end. Maybe it was the bridge between breaking and rebuilding. She looked up at the stars, clutching the letter. "If you meant it, Adrian, if you really meant it, come back." Her whisper vanished into the night, carried out over the sea. Would you walk away from someone who hurt you, even if you saw they'd changed? Or would you risk your heart one more time? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's see how brave love can be. A week had passed since Adrian left. Porto Azul had returned to its rhythm. Fishermen at dawn, bells at noon, seagulls circling above. Yet to Clara, everything sounded distant, hollow. The bakery still opened, the bread still rose, Leo still laughed. But something essential was missing, the quiet hum of possibility that had filled her life when Adrian was near. Mrs. Rivera noticed the change. "You bake like a ghost," she said gently one morning. Clara sighed, dusting flour from her hands. "I'm fine." "Fine is the word people use when they've stopped hoping," the old woman replied. "Don't let pride make you lonely, Nina." But Clara only smiled faintly and turned away, because loneliness was already her closest companion. That night, when Leo was asleep, she sat at her desk and opened a blank page. The candle flickered, throwing shadows across the room. She began to write. "Adrian, you taught me that forgiveness is not forgetting. It's choosing to remember without hate. I don't know if I'm ready to forgive, but I know I'm tired of carrying anger. You hurt me once by leaving, and again by coming back too late. But I can't deny what I saw in you, the man you're trying to be." Leo saw it too. Maybe love doesn't die. Maybe it just waits for courage. She stared at the words, her pen trembling. Then she folded the letter carefully and set it aside, unfinished, like a prayer she wasn't ready to send. The next afternoon, Leo sat on the bakery floor surrounded by crayons, drawing another family portrait. Clara glanced down and froze. In the picture, 3 stick figures held hands. One tall, one small, one with curly hair like hers. "Who's that?" she asked softly, pointing to the tall figure. Leo grinned. "Mr. Tree Man. He's coming back soon, right?" Her throat tightened. "Why do you think that?" "Because promises don't break," he said confidently, as if it were the simplest truth in the world. Clara smiled through tears. "Sometimes they do, sweetheart." Leo shook his head, scribbling brighter colors into the picture. "Not when they're real." His words echoed in her heart long after he ran off to play. That evening, as Clara cleaned the counter, a local radio station played softly in the background. She wasn't really listening, until a familiar voice cut through the static. Today's guest, former CEO Adrian Vale, has made headlines for stepping away from his empire to pursue humanitarian projects. "Mr. Vale, tell us why." Clara froze, sponge in hand. Adrian's voice came through the speaker, calm but raw. "Because power without purpose is empty. I used to think success was about control. But sometimes you have to lose everything to understand love." The host chuckled. "Sounds personal." Adrian's pause was heavy, aching. "It is. I hurt someone I love because I thought strength meant silence. Now I know the strongest thing a man can do is say, 'I was wrong.'" Clara's eyes filled. "If she's listening," Adrian continued, "I want her to know, this isn't goodbye. It's a promise I'll spend my life trying to keep." The radio crackled, and the interview ended. For a long time, Clara stood motionless, the soft hum of the station fading into silence. Then she whispered, "You fool, you beautiful fool." The next morning, a storm threatened again, not fierce like before, but restless, impatient. The sky above Porto Azul swirled gray, and the air tasted like change. Clara stood at the pier, the unfinished letter in her pocket. Mrs. Rivera's voice replayed in her head. Don't let pride make you lonely. She closed her eyes and listened to the waves, to the gulls, to the heartbeat of her own fear. She could stay safe in her bitterness, or she could take a risk that might break her all over again. She took the letter out, smoothing the creases with trembling fingers. Maybe courage isn't loud, she murmured. Maybe it's just quiet persistence. And for the first time, she knew what she had to do. London was gray and cold, the kind of city that swallowed warmth whole. Adrian stood in his penthouse overlooking the skyline, a view that once thrilled him but now felt like exile. Stacks of paperwork lay untouched. Journalists waited downstairs. The world expected a statement, a comeback, another empire. But all he could see in the glass was his own reflection, tired, hollow-eyed, haunted. He whispered to the man in the mirror, "You've won everything except peace." On the table lay Clara's ultrasound photo, the one he'd carried for years. Next to it, the music box his mother once wound for him. He turned the key, and the soft, broken melody filled the room, the sound of memory and regret. Then, for the first time, Adrian smiled. Not the practiced grin of the businessman, but the gentle, uncertain smile of a man finally choosing his truth. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. "Cancel the press conference," he said. "Sir, I'm done explaining myself to people who don't matter." He hung up, grabbed his passport, and whispered, "I'm going home." Rain lashed against the airplane window as the jet lifted off. Adrian closed his eyes, heart pounding. He thought of Clara standing at the pier, her hair whipping in the wind, her eyes full of both love and hurt. He thought of Leo's laughter, of kites, of flower-dusted mornings and second chances he almost lost. The flight was long, but his thoughts never strayed. Every mile between London and Porto Azul felt like a test of faith. When the plane landed, the storm had broken. The sun was breaking through clouds, painting gold across the wet tarmac. He took it as a sign. Meanwhile, in Porto Azul, Clara stood outside the post office, a trembling letter in her hands. She had finally finished it the night before and sent it before she could change her mind. "Adrian, if you meant what you said, then find your way back. Not because I forgive you, but because I believe people can try again. If love really is a choice, this is mine." She stared at the ocean beyond the village, unaware that the man she'd written to was already on his way home. By late afternoon, the bakery bell chimed softly. Clara looked up from the counter and froze. Adrian stood in the doorway, travel-worn, rain-soaked, but unmistakably real. Neither spoke at first. The sound of the sea filled the silence. Finally, she found her voice. "You got my letter." He nodded, stepping closer. "Halfway across the Atlantic. And it was the only thing that kept me breathing." Her lips trembled. "Why did you come back?" He smiled faintly. "Because I finally understood what strength means. It's not controlled. It's showing up, even when you're not sure you'll be forgiven." Clara blinked back tears. "You left me once." "I know." His voice broke. "But I swear to you, Clara, I'll spend every day proving I'll never do it again." She looked at him for a long time, searching for the man she once loved, and in his eyes, she saw him. Not the billionaire, not the coward, but the man who had learned how to stay. "I don't know if I can forget," she whispered. "I don't need you to," he said. "Just remember me differently." For a moment, time seemed to hold its breath. Then she stepped forward and rested her hand against his chest. "Welcome home, Mr. Tree Man." His breath caught, and then he pulled her close, careful but certain. Outside, the rain began again, not the storm of before, but a gentle, cleansing drizzle. The world felt new. Leo burst into the room, laughter bubbling as he saw Adrian. "You came back." Adrian knelt, opening his arms. "I promised, didn't I?" Leo hugged him tightly. "Mama said promises break." Adrian smiled through tears. "Not this one." The boy leaned back, studying him. "Your eyes look like mine," he said simply. Clara laughed, tears finally spilling. "That's how I knew too." Adrian looked up at her, heart overflowing. Then I guess they've always told the truth. And when he kissed her, soft, reverent, unhurried, it wasn't an ending. It was the beginning. The morning after Adrian's return, Porto Azul glowed beneath a soft sunrise, the kind that painted even cracked rooftops gold. For the first time in years, Clara woke not to emptiness but to warmth. She turned and saw him there, asleep in the chair by her bed, still in yesterday's clothes, his head tilted toward Leo's tiny crib beside her. His hand was resting protectively over Leo's. He must have stayed up all night watching them. Something in her chest broke open, not with pain this time, but peace. She whispered, "You really came back." He stirred, eyes blinking open. "I said I would." Clara smiled faintly. "You always say the right things too late." He grinned softly. "Then let me start early this time." He leaned closer and kissed her forehead, a gesture simple but full of meaning. Not possession, not apology, just love, plain and real. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of their lives began to take shape again. Adrian worked alongside Clara in the bakery, clumsy at first, covered in flour by noon, burning half the croissants, but he never complained. "I've closed billion-dollar deals," he groaned one morning as Clara corrected his dough technique. "And I've never been this nervous." Clara laughed. "That's because money doesn't yell at you when you forget the sugar." Leo giggled from his stool. "Daddy, you're slow." Adrian froze, the word daddy hanging in the air like fragile glass. Clara's hands stilled too, eyes flickering with surprise. But Leo just kept laughing, completely unaware of how that word healed something vast and invisible between them. Adrian crouched, smiling through misted eyes. "You know what, buddy? I think you're right. I am slow." And for the first time, it didn't matter. One afternoon, Adrian drove out to the orphanage he'd once visited for charity years ago, back when philanthropy had been just a PR word. Now, he came with no cameras, no agenda. He spent the day reading stories to the children, helping repair broken swings, and donating quietly in honor of his mother. The headmistress watched him with tears in her eyes. "You've changed, Mr. Vale." He smiled. "I just stopped pretending I hadn't lost anything." When he returned home that evening, Clara was closing up the bakery. He handed her a single sunflower. "For what?" she asked. "For every day you survived without me." She touched the petals gently. "And what about every day I'll live with you?" He looked at her, eyes glimmering. "Those are the ones I'll spend earning." That night, the three of them sat on the small balcony, sharing warm bread and laughter under the stars. Leo had fallen asleep halfway through a story, his head resting on Adrian's arm. Clara whispered, "He used to ask for you every night." Adrian's jaw tightened, guilt flickering in his eyes. "I don't deserve that." Clara shook her head. "That's not how love works. It's not about deserving. It's about showing up." He turned to her, voice rough. "Then I'll keep showing up until it feels like I belong." She smiled faintly. "You already do." The sea breeze brushed past them, carrying the smell of salt and cinnamon. For once, silence wasn't awkward, it was enough. Porto Azul had always been small enough for gossip to travel faster than the wind. When word spread that the billionaire who left was now sweeping bakery floors and delivering bread at dawn, people watched in wary curiosity. But slowly, suspicion turned into admiration. He donated to rebuild the Fisherman's Pier. He funded a small scholarship in Clara's name for local girls studying business. When Mrs. Rivera's old shop burned in a minor fire, Adrian personally helped restore it, paintbrush in hand, soot on his face, smiling at every passerby who stopped to stare. One evening, the mayor himself came by and said, "Mr. Vale, Porto Azul could use more men like you." Adrian only smiled and looked toward Clara. "No, sir. Porto Azul just helped me remember how to be one." A month later, another storm rolled in, milder this time, but enough to rattle windows and send people rushing indoors. Clara stood at the bakery window, watching lightning strike over the ocean. The scene mirrored that night years ago, the night he had denied her, when everything had fallen apart. Adrian walked up beside her, wrapping a steady arm around her shoulders. "Funny," he murmured. "I used to hate storms. Now they remind me of the day my life started over." Clara smiled up at him. "That's because you finally learned to listen to what they're saying." "And what are they saying now?" She leaned into him, her voice barely a whisper. "That sometimes love needs to break us before it can find us." He kissed her hair, eyes closed. "Then I'm glad it did." The storm cleared overnight, leaving the sky washed clean. The next morning, Porto Azul woke to the kind of brightness that felt like a blessing. Clara found Leo tugging at Adrian's sleeve, eyes alight. "Daddy, can we go to the beach today? The big kite wants to fly again." Adrian laughed, remembering the torn kite they had once repaired together, the one Leo had called the brave one. "Of course," he said softly. "Let's see if it still remembers how." They walked down to the same stretch of sand where everything had changed, the place where truth had broken them, and love had brought them back. The wind was strong but playful. Leo ran ahead, barefoot, kite string trailing like sunlight. Clara and Adrian followed, their hands brushing. "You know," she said, watching the kite soar, "there was a time I couldn't look at that sky without thinking of pain. And now," she smiled, "now I see the possibility." He glanced up too, eyes reflecting blue and gold. "I used to see distance. Now I see home." Later that afternoon, as the tide rolled in, Adrian led Clara toward the old wooden pier, rebuilt since the last storm, shining in fresh varnish. She looked at him curiously. "What are we doing here?" He smiled nervously. "Something I should have done years ago." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, the color of the sea. Inside was a simple gold ring, nothing extravagant, just timeless, elegant, real. Her breath caught. "Adrian, I used to think love was about perfection," he said, voice trembling. "But it's not. It's about staying. About showing up when everything falls apart. You taught me that." Tears shimmered in her eyes. He took her hand. "Clara Reyes, I don't want to fix the past. I just want to build the future with you. Will you marry me?" For a long moment, the world seemed to pause. The waves hushed. The gulls circled in silence. Then she laughed, that soft, melodic sound he'd missed for years, and whispered, "Yes, Adrian. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the wind caught their laughter, carrying it out across the water like a promise kept. They married a month later, in the courtyard behind the bakery. A small ceremony with sunflowers, white linen, and the smell of warm bread. Mrs. Rivera cried through the entire service. Leo was the ring bearer, proudly wearing suspenders 2 sizes too big. When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," Adrian leaned in and whispered, "You were right." "About what?" she murmured. "Promises don't break when they're real." Their kiss was soft but certain, sealing not just love, but forgiveness, and the ending of every storm they'd survived. The crowd cheered. Bells rang from the chapel, and in that golden afternoon light, everything that had once been broken finally felt whole again. 1 year later, the bakery had a new sign. The Brave One Cafe, love baked daily. Adrian had left his empire for good. Now, he handled orders, washed dishes, and spent afternoons teaching Leo how to count change. Clara had opened a small charity fund through the cafe, helping single mothers start businesses. Life wasn't perfect. Some mornings were hard. Bills still needed paying, but it was theirs. Honest. Real. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ocean, Clara leaned against Adrian by the door. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The boardrooms, the power, the fame." He looked down at her, then at Leo chasing bubbles on the sand. "No," he said quietly, "because I never felt rich until now." As twilight fell, Leo ran toward them, pointing to the horizon. "Look, the sky's the same color as your eyes, Daddy." Clara smiled, tears glinting in the fading light. "That's how I knew, remember?" Adrian looked at her, then at his son, those matching blue eyes that had once undone his denial, now shining with belonging. He knelt, pulling Leo close. And that's how I'll never forget. The three of them stood together, the last light of day brushing gold across their faces. The sea whispered its approval. The kite soared above, fearless against the wind. And as the camera of life pulled back, their laughter drifted across the waves, proof that love, when given a second chance, could rewrite even the harshest truths. That night, after tucking Leo into bed, Clara and Adrian sat outside beneath the stars. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" He nodded. "Every day, and every day, I thank the storm for sending me back to you." She smiled softly. "Then maybe storms aren't endings after all." "No," he said, kissing her hand. "They're just how love finds its way home." And in the stillness that followed, they sat together, no longer haunted by what was, but alive in what would always be. They say time heals all wounds, but maybe it's love that finishes the work. Adrian Vale learned that power means nothing if you can't hold on to the ones who matter. Clara learned that forgiveness isn't surrender, it's strength. And little Leo, he taught them both that truth can live in a single glance, in eyes that mirror the best of what was lost and the promise of what remains. In a world obsessed with perfect love stories, theirs wasn't perfect, it was real. And sometimes, real is enough. If you've ever believed that love deserves a second chance, drop a comment, because maybe, just maybe, every storm leads someone home, and comment below what forgiveness means to you. Maybe your story could remind someone else that healing is still possible.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So, do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.